I am Lee Standing Bear Moore. I am Katua, Chata, and English. But that's not my fault. It's not my fault, okay? The story of Manataka is as old as anybody can remember. It's certainly as old as these trees. Nobody knows exactly how long ago that Manataka came into being. We feel that it was certainly by act of Creator that it happened. It all began so long, long ago that the people of the land would come here because they knew that Manataka had many, many gifts. Some say they came because of the beautiful, beautiful stones, the crystal stones, the stones that speak and have memory.
What?
The healing stone, in many cases. Some say they came here because of the healing water. I don't know. Maybe they did. All I know is they couldn't carry very much of it back home with them, could they? And an Indian does not do anything for himself. An Indian does everything for other people. His family, his people, his tribe. That's what he lives for, is to be able to serve. So to say that he would travel hundreds of miles, thousands of miles to come to Manataka to benefit himself, that would not have happened. So why did they come here? We know, for example, that the Lakota came way up in North Dakota, South Dakota. But long before they got there, they lived around the Great Lakes too, near the Potawatomi people. And before that, they lived on the East Coast. And the Lakota people came here many times. Many, many times. They brought gifts. We know the Dakota people, Nakota, Santee, Hunkpapa, Brule, Oglala. All of those northern nations, they came. We know the Potawatomi came, and the Kickapoo. We know they came. We know up in the east, the Anastasi of the far southwest. But up in the northeast, people of the 5 nations, of the 6 nations rather, the Mohawk, the Onondaga, they came to Manataka. How do we know they came here? How do we know this? The National Park Service claims that no one came here. No one came here. That is what their wish is for you to believe, that this was not a good place. So why did they come? We know that the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, the Cherokee, the Yamasee, all of those people of the southeast, the Cree, they came too. We know that the Hopi in the southwest came. We know the Paiute came. Why would they risk themselves going across raging rivers, going through snowstorms or sandstorms, and certainly maybe even hunger on the trail? The dangers of the trail itself, accidents that may happen, ferocious animals, ferocious people. Why would a small group, and they were mostly small groups of people who would come. Not large enough to be a war party. Maybe a little smaller than a hunting party. But they were coming to find something. Why? Why did they come? Because we know, for example, that even the Maya people, far down in Mexico, southern Mexico, they would come. They would begin their journey in early April, in March, and they would not get here until October, walking. Why did they come, though? What was their purpose in coming to Manataca? Certainly they had good blessed waters where they lived. So why would they need the hot waters of hot springs? We know that they had magnificent herbs, the same as Manataca did. Very powerful, very strong. We know that they came and received the blessings of the healing clay that is found here too. You know about the healing clay?
Yeah.
You know about the healing clay? The women really liked it because they would take the clay and then make it into little balls, you know? And then they would take the balls and put it in their pouch, especially when they were heavy with the baby, kind of like me. And every morning, they would eat one of those balls of clay. And every night, as they retire, they would eat another clay ball. Why? Because it is the minerals that their body craved. Their body wanted and needed at that time. And when they ate it, they became stronger and stronger. And they were able to go out into the woods or in their own home and have their baby quietly. They were strong. And it was the clay, the healing clay, that made them so. Now the men, they liked it for a different reason. Because they would take the healing clay of Manataca and they would make it wet like mud. If they had a bee sting or a wasp sting or poison ivy, poison oak, anything like that that would get under the skin, they would take and wrap it with a leaf or maybe leather and make it into a poultice where it was very tight against the skin. Pretty soon that clay worked, and whatever was inside the skin was pushed out. And so maybe 30 minutes later they take the wrapping out, brush it, and all the wasp sting is gone.
There's multi-minerals supply. He added, in nature's favorite behaviors to lead to survival. It is simply be that women who had this craving were more likely to survive and pass on this tendency to their offspring. Mineral content in clay vary from region to region, but many contain high levels of calcium, iron, copper, and magnesium. These are essential minerals in human diet, but even more critical during pregnancy. Erica Gibson Stanley, an anthropologist at Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida, have found that geography and most often found in cultures that do not practice dairy, and dairy products like milk and cheese will provide important dietary calcium, but we are lactose intolerant. All of us. When these are absent, pregnant women may seek other sources. It is about women lacking nutrients or women in impoverished conditions who don't have access to health care, adapting, said Gibson Stingley. Building effects on clay would cause it to absorb toxins, said Dr. L. Katz, nutrient experts at the Yale School of Medicine and of medical contributors for ABC News. Clay's ability to absorb plant toxins is well documented. Jared Diamond, professor of geography and psychological in David Green School of Medical at UCA, and authors of Guns, Germs, and Steel, The Face of Human Society, have written on clay that are especially good at binding with plant toxins. Not in many traditional cultures cook food like potatoes, acorns, and breads in clay as a way of protecting against toxic alkaloids and tannic acids that would otherwise make these foods inedible. Glycoloids, for example, are commonly found in potatoes and could cause diarrhea and vomiting and neurological problems in humans. But when South American Indians eat these potatoes in combination with the alkaloid binding clay, these potatoes are safe to consume around, according to Diamond. It melts in your mouth like chocolate, says Ruth Ann T. Joyner, describing her favorite treat. The good stuff is real smooth, she adds. It's just like a piece of candy. Joyner is describing the delectable taste of dirt, specifically clay, from the region around her hometown in Montezuma, Georgia. While most people would recoil at the thought of eating mud or clay, some medical experts say this is beneficial, especially for pregnant women. Every time I get pregnant, I get a craving. I have to eat it, says Joyner, 40, who has given birth to four healthy babies. It could just, if I could just get one little bitty piece, that would stop the craving, she says. It has a fresh, natural feeling, tastes like rain or something. Healthy habits or mental issues. The habit of eating clay or mud or dirt is known as geophag. I don't know what the fuck that is. Geohog, geohography. Some experts lump it into the same category of pica. Yeah, I've heard that, which is abdominal urges to eat coins, plants, soap, or non-food items. Cultures worldwide have practiced geographic centuries, from the ancient Greeks to the natives. Once again, we're right back with the same cultures. Dr. Faith says nearly every culture has passed through a phase of earth eating known as geography, but it appears to be most prevalent these days among rural black women in the South, some of whom say they eat a handful a day, snacking from bags or jars in which they keep dirt that has been dug from their favorite clay bank, baked and often seasoned with vinegar and salt. In addition, families here in LaFleur County sometimes mail shoeboxes full of dirt to relatives who have moved north but still crave the flavor of the dirt dug from the clay hills back home. According to Dr. Faith, others, there is no evidence among those who have been surveyed that dirt eating is harmful to their health. It is after a rainfall when the earth smells so rich and damp and flavorful. The Fanny Glass says the most misses having some dirt to eat. It just always tastes so good to me, says Miss Glass, who now eschews a practice that she acquired a small girl from her mother when a practice that she acquired as a small girl from her mother. When it's good and dug from the right place, dirt has a fine sour taste. For generations, the eating of clay-rich dirt has been a curious but present custom in some rural areas of Mississippi and southern states, practiced over the years by poor whites and blacks. But while it is not uncommon these days to find people here who eat dirt, scholars or others who have studied the practice say it is clearly on. And we have the southern practice of eating dirt and signs and more. You see who they got down there, from Southern Indians. I wish I could find the real article for you, but that's all they would give me. As young, and most common responses, I do not know, I just do. But here, an interesting theory: clay is known to act as a natural filter and often used to clean up massive oil spills and absorb unwanted scents from places. Think kitty litter. in Troy University says he has spoken with shop owners who receive orders from as far away as London. Eating dirt has a unique history for starters. It is not a recent phenomenon. These evidence that our ancestors were eating dirt at least 2 million years ago when Homo sapiens were still Homo habilis, natural anthropologist Sarah Young of Cornell University says. Pregnant today, local stores and flea markets throughout the South sell packages of dirt in Ziploc bags, though they're labeled as novelty items. Everybody know they are for seeing those bags. Uh, Quick filmmaker Adam Forster interest whether they tell you not or not people are eating it, says Forster, who feels came across a package of clay in his hometown of Columbus, Georgia. His new documentary, Eat White Dirt, takes a closer look at the bizarre, under the radar practice. Also, know people that eat the red clay, like red clay, over the white dirt. White dirt is actually a soft, chalky clay called coin and is widely used to make porcelain, paper, and paint. These minerals and coilinite is one of the most common in the world, and the best known deposits are located in the southern U.S. Mamie Lee Hillman discusses the history of coiling and around Georgia and Greene County. Shout out to the engine. To go with her family to dig up their own dirt to snack on. It was an acceptable thing people did. White dirt is actually a soft, chalky clay called coiling, and it's widely used to make. Yeah, we read that. Alright. This came out of Mark Twain, Life on the Mississippi. Present 30 or 35 were likely to be from the river, but I suspected that the rank were then now the steamboat no longer an aristocracy. Why in my time they used to call the barkeep Bill and Joe or Tom and slap him on the shoulder. I watched for that, but none of the people did it. Manifestly a glory that one was had dissolved and vanished away in the 21 years when I went up to my room and I found there a young man called Roger crying. Roger was not his name, neither was Jones, Brown, Dexter, Ferguson, Bascom, or Thompson, but he answered to either of these that a body found handy in emergency, or to any other name. In fact, if he perceived what you meant him. He said, "What is a person to do here when he wants a drink of water? Drink this slush. Can you drink it?" I could if I had some water to wash it with. Here was a thing which had not changed, a source of years, had not affected the water mulatto complexion in the least. A source of centuries would succeed no better, perhaps. It could, out of a turbulent bank carving Missouri, every tumblerful of its hold, nearly an acre of land in solution. Okay, it says it comes out of a turbulent bank caving Missouri, and of every tumblerful of its hold, nearly an acre of land in solution. I could this fact from the bishop of the sea. This, I don't know what that is. If you will let your glass stand half an hour, you can separate the land from the water as easy as Genesis, and then you will find them both good, and the one good to eat and the other good to drink. The land very nourishing, the water is very thoroughly wholesome. The one appeases hunger. Separately but together in nature mix them. When they find an inch of mud in the bottom of a glass, they stir it up and take a draught as they would gruel. It is difficult for a stranger to get used to this batter, but once used to it, he will prefer it to water. This is really the case. It is good for steamboating and good to drink. but is worthless for other purposes except baptizing. Next morning we drove around town in the rain, and the city seemed but little changed. It was greatly changed, but it did not seem so. But in St. Louis and London and Pittsburgh, you can persuade a new thing to look. The cold smoke turns into the antiquity in a moment. You will take your hand of it and then place your hand just about doubled its size since I was a resident of it and was now to become a city of 400,000 inhabitants, still in a solid business parts. It looked about as it had looked formerly, yet I am sure there is not as much smoke in St. Louis now as there used to be. The smoke used to bank itself in a dense, billowy black canopy over the town, and the height of the sky from the view, the shelter is very much thinner now. Still, there is sufficiently a smoke there. I think I heard no complaint. However, on the outskirts, changes were apparent enough, notably in the dwelling houses and agriculture. The fine new homes are noble and beautiful. Okay, we just read that with them. So we're gonna get into that. Like we said, the Aztecs are reduced to slavery in the lowest state of degradation and the insufficient Cholula. And the largest of Chichen Itza and the Aztecs and the Mexicans are frequently called in history the Mexicans, without discrimination or distinguishing the, the Mexicans from those who arrived before them. It may be allowed as they spoke the same language. The Montezuma's race were the Aztecs, but the following reason are offered that they arrived by sea and not with the seven tribes. North in the northern prisons, so those who be pardoned at the places. Let's not get into that. We weren't here for that. I'm trying to find a Ignatius Donnelly Dirt. The book is the book we are looking for. I'm gonna hit pause till then. You tried to clown your boy. He's making fun of me. Said I don't look like that. I didn't make this. He made it. It's hilarious. All right, we got this book. He said this is about where the comet or the says the world about a million years ago during many previous ages and up to the catastrophe about 800,000 years ago. The world after the catastrophe of 8,000 years ago up to about 200,000 years ago. What is this up here underneath the Atlantis sign? Is that supposed to be the North Pole? Somebody let me know something. Somebody let me know something. What's that? Okay, 200,000. Alright. You see that continent up there up north is shrinking, is melting. So the North Pole melted into tiny little islands. But they always say that it was all touching, so that's kind of weird. But to find out what them little islands up there are. You name those two continents, two, and then they said there was a small one between Africa and South America. and see where it was at. Okay, they can almost consider it touching the islands up into North America. As you can see, it helped the formation of Asia. Whatever, I guess the red would be population. So America was basically people from Atlantis. The old world, Africa and everything were already kind of people. Pretty heavily from Atlantis into Africa and the rest of the world. So as you can see, it became a small island. Ragnarok. The original hypothesis about the comet impact that had widespread effect on human populations can be attributed to Edmund Halley, who in 1694 suggested that the worldwide flood had been a result of a near miss by a comet. That the issue was taken up more detail by William Winston, the protege of the Pulitzer of the theories of Isaac Newton, who argued in his new book, A New Theory of the Earth, that a comet's impact was the probable cause of the biblical flood of Noah. Winston also attributes the origins of the atmosphere and original significant changes in the earth and effects of the comet. It hypothesized that the impact event brought about an extinction of many species of North American Pliocene megafauna. Their animal included camels, mammoths, giant short-faced bears, and numerous other species that proponents suggest died out at this time. The purpose markers for the impact event are claimed to have contributed to the transition from Clovis culture to a subsequent pattern. This supports the evidence is claimed to have triggered extensive biomass during the brief impact winter abrupt climate change. It says comet may have exploded over Canada 12,900 years ago. After all, University of South Carolina new evidence supports for the theory introduced in 2007 suggests a comet may have exploded over Canada 12,900 years ago. The Younger Dryas boundary killing of the Clovis people and large animals, sending the Earth back into the Ice Age. It refutes a study in 2009 that failed to replicate the findings over the 2007 study. The key finding in the new study resulted in the sampling done in archaeological sites known as Topper. It says shortly after volcanic activity, which weakened the electromagnetic and geomagnetic structure of the Earth plane, a comet approached Earth, destroying the Great Crystal. And with a piece of the comet of Atlantis, the comet soared into the western shores of Atlantis, close to where Charleston, South Carolina is today. In the southern western region of the two largest pieces struck the main body of Atlantis, and portions of Atlantis sunk as it broke into several islands, leaving three main islands, Posida, Arian, and Og. Over time, though, the continued abuse of the Great Crystal, you shifted the lower octaves of fourth dimensions consciousness and later flowing the maritime experiment, you would have to shift from dimensional consciousness to the third dimension consciousness, which made many of the beings to doubt your infinite eternal connection to the Mother and Father God. As the comet was approaching Earth, you were able to see it in space, but most of the Atlanteans wanted to allow the comet to approach the Earth, thinking that it would land in the ocean and would be causing too much destruction. electromagnetic and geomagnetic grids created. This is with so much strength that the greatest wind devastated not one of them from the mountain upwards in a direct line, and whose forked head and the Spaniards resolved to climb, and having gone several and a half ways up, they were forced to return, the ashes lying knee deep, and last two more uh, conquered all those difficulties and got to the top or the mouth of the cave, and they gusted measured 4 miles of circumference. The shaking of the mountain and the roaring of the flames frequently bursting forth, and much terrified them, and they said no longer therefore, as we said, the ground not only trembled under them, but the fiercely gulp ejected great stones, which falling down all sides of the mountain rolled to the bottom, and without doubt they had there perished, and they not speedily run to the hollow neighboring hill. Okay. You see Spanish running from the rocks after they went up there to an exploding volcano like some dummies.
Oriental Masonry. 27. America, Atlantis, and is the curtain which has hitherto concealed the prehistoric connection between the peoples of ancient Egypt and of America, is lifted. It will be seen that, the people of the eagle on the Nile being descended from the original people of the eagle on this continent, the twain are one, and that prehistoric America was the original Egypt or Eagle Land, prior to the mighty dispensation in the days of Peleg. When the earth was divided, and the great globe itself was nearly rent asunder. Asterisk. Over which accordingly appear two grand eagles, the red swan flying down the Milky Way, and the winged steeds, Pegasus and Equalus, all the wings known to astronomy without taking the bear from Russia, Perseus from Persia, and a flood of light is poured upon the history and mythology, and where heretofore much has been vague and inscrutable, now we are able at least, to see men, as trees, walking. 9. When, following the course of the constellations, those immovably and perpetually fastened upon Nerika are reached, it will appear that, while all that is sublime in the historic past centers upon Egypt, all that is sublime in the prehistoric past centers upon. See Philosophy of Fire. Interwoven with the very warp and woof of all sacred literature, Christian and pagan, refer to occurrences as literally true as the earthquake of Lisbon, these stupendous events being connected primarily with a great destruction and recovery of equilibrium in the solar system, and secondly with the consequent wrecking of the continent of America when the globe became involved in the consequences of the disorder of the skies. America, known to the mystic as Atlantis, when this ruined Bethel, was the seat of the greatest empire that has ever existed, and its irresistible armies were terrorizing all Europe and Asia. 8. Study of the American constellations Scorpio, Sagittarius, and Capricornus reveals the immemorial Olmecs as those found on some ceramic plates. Hunab-Ku is seen as the first creator being in the guise of the young maize god, resurrecting to new life by splitting his own skull and emerging as a new maize god. Hunab-Ku, while being one, was also dual, as the god embodied his feminine version as well. The symbol for Hunab-Ku is very much like a yin-yang symbol, and is said to represent the solar calendar, the duality of creation, balanced forces and perfection. In this way, he is similar to the concept of the unknowable Tao. Some archaeologists and astrophysicists now surmise that Hunab-Ku is the symbol that the ancient Mayans used for the gateway to other galaxies beyond our sun. This would make it a stargate, similar to the portal the Egyptians believed would facilitate their souls going forward into a part of the sky known as the Duat. Other theorists along these lines claim that Hunab-Ku is the galactic center, the literal core that our galaxy revolves around. In addition to the 4 children known as the Bakab who ruled over the 4 corners of the world, Hunab-Ku also begat Itzamna, often known as the son of Hunab-Ku. Itzamna is considered to be the founder of the Mayan culture. He is credited with introducing maize and cacao and teaching them writing, healing, and the use of calendars. As the bringer of culture, he became the state god of the Mayan Empire. As the moon god, he ruled over the night. Itzamna also bore the title of Lord of Knowledge. 2 different hieroglyphs were used to represent Itzamna. The first was a conventional representation of his own head, and the second was a design that featured the symbol for the day Ahau. This day sign means king, emperor, monarch, prince or great lord, thus giving Itzamna the position of chief of the Mayan gods, as well as being patron of the day Ahau, the last of the 20 Mayan days. Itzamna is said to be similar to the Aztec god Ometeotl. In Mayan mythology, Hunab-Ku first created the earth with the aid of 7 lesser gods, including the gods Tepeu and Gukyamats, who are referred to as the creators, the makers, and the forefathers among the various gods. They were 2 of the first beings to exist and were said to be very wise. Hurakan, or the heart of heaven, was also an early god but not given the personification that typified other gods. Hurakan acted more like a terrible storm, and it is from his name that we get our word, hurricane. Deep in the mists of time, Tepeu and Gukyamats had a conference with other gods, such as Hurakan, and decided origin of our aborigines. 307. Tahiti from the south or southeast, who had darts of guanin, a composition of gold, silver, and copper, and were called the Black Guaninis. These might have been the Negroes of Quarika mentioned by Peter Martyr Dangleria, or some other American Negro nation, the like of which there were many, as we may see in Rafinesque's account of the ancient black nations of America. Such are the Cheruas of Brazil, the Black Caribbees of St. Vincent in the Gulf of Mexico, the Jamasi of Florida, the dark-complexioned Californians, who are perhaps the dark men mentioned in Classic Horizon, a lower start, from 2,700 to 1,500 years before the era. The middle level, from 1,500 to 600 before the era. And the upper one from 600 to a little before, a little after, the beginning of the age. It is also proposed to identify the levels, in the first case, the oldest ceramics reaching the type, Villajón, or the Catora, from Chiapa de Corzo. In the middle level, the little heads known as Tres Zapotes inferior, and at the top, the Cara de Niño. However, it still seems premature to try to identify the physical type of the Olmecs, but not so in the Horizon, and much less in the late Classic, when their most stupendous characterizations are achieved. Miguel Covarrubias, the finest pupil in Olmec art, showed by highlighting the lines of Stela II found in La Venta, a character completely strange to the indigenous world, a rabbi with a typical nose and long beard, one would say, as if to inflame the fantasy of those who they tracked down the tribes of Israel. Assuming some possibility, it was isolated data. Instead, other representations abound, characterize squatting fat dwarfs and children. dignified characters of Mongoloid and Negroid type at the same time. It is difficult to guess if a certain size tries to represent a man disguised as a jaguar, or a jaguar during the process of becoming a man. A bearded person with flat noses. According to Covarrubias, today it has not been possible to insist more on the Asian, Mongoloid air, supposedly noticed in some works, because if the representation turned its oblique eyes, there is no trace of the eye of the Mongolian fold. On the other hand, since the first news about the colossal head of Huayapin, J.M. Malgar, 1871, there was talk of Negroid features and no one has stopped wanting to put that nightmare aside. For any human group there can be consideration, less for blacks. They will be highly respected here, whatever the end result. And long literary runs are not urgent when archaeological evidence is well documented, awaiting impartial and honest judgment. The sculpture found in the Huayapin stream, in Tres Zapotes, and that today is in the municipal park of Santiago Tuzla, Vir, is a faithful representation of a black man. There would be a subterfuge, both this sculpture of the Negro, as well as the others with black or Negroid characteristics, do not have frizzy, curly hair, and certainly not. It was a problem for the plastic arts, that's why they were represented with helmets or with shaved hair. But Alfonso Medellin Zinal transferred 2 Olmec sculptures from Laguna de los Cerros to the Museum of Anthropology in Jalapa, which do have Cresno hair. Like, comment.
Diez trece de la noche o 75%. El negro, from Tres Zapotes, ver. 109. Like. Comment. Because if in the cold the hair turns chinito, no indigenous corpse gets the hair on its head like that. Nor seek an escape with the patchly balls, because on the contrary. The patchly balls were used to imitate curly hair, and the people or deities who wore them were black. In another field, cultural elements of Black Africa, whose identification is evident, have reached the present day. Its presence in Mexico can be attributed to the blacks brought in by the Spanish, but surprisingly, outside the shape of the houses, which coincide in the area of Córdoba, Vir. It is not there where they are found, but, as in the case of the typical houses of the Ivory Coast, they are at the confluence of the states of Puebla, Morelos, Guerrero, and in Tlaxcala of the historical Olmecs. Finally, it has already been said how paragraph 40 of the 7th tradition in the Popol Vuh, recounting the stay of the Quiche ruling caste with the Olmecs of southern Veracruz, stated, "Then the black people and the white people remained there. Their similarities, different languages, the way of seeing and hearing of those people." The Popoloca language has already been considered as its speech, and in the distant case of the Guatemalan group, the affiliation is clear and strong. There is another outbreak, the Chantales. It will be premature to try to make stratifications in this regard when the study is about to be undertaken, but the problem cannot be postponed. In the case of La Chantalpa, Tabascania, transparency is exemplary. That was the southern fringe of the Olmec territory. In the state of Guerrero, it is also very clear that there is talk of Chantales where there was Olmec culture, and that must have been the reason on the Oaxacan coast with its Chantales, or even Nicaragua. Considering the Subtiaba group in its neighborhood and relationship with the Corategas, in some cases the antecedent would come from pre-classic times, in others from classic times. From historical times, and the change of language could have been made to Mayan, as in Tabasco, Nahuatl, as in other places, but in the background, the people, the Olmec culture. In Sahagun's pages there is marked but separable confusion when he speaks of Cuixcas, Talapanecas, and Yopimes. The final part of the paragraph corresponds to the Olmecs, given below. They are properly called Tenim, Panom, Chinkim, Chochanti. In general they call Tenim, which means barbarian people. As for Pinatl, Panom. And Wigberto Jimenez Moreno has commented that thus.
Moreno, remember that word. Moreno people, shout out to my Moreno down there who don't know nothing about being no African, but they get it put on them anyway.
Si buscando los más. If looking for the most remote beginnings of the Totonac people, their territory was contemplated in a time still without ceramics, perhaps the dominant panorama were groups with a Mayoid aspect, with agricultural culture and sedentary life. But then, questions would also arise for the stones worked by men, which would correspond to a certainly prehistoric stage. A comparison of Totonac, Mayan, Huaxtec, and Popolocan physical types would note a lighter color, perhaps whiter, for the Totonacs. And who knows if such a fortuitous coincidence had links with a very distant data that their informants gave to Sahagun. All, men and women, are white, with good, well-disposed faces. With good features and, in terms of singularities, the Popolocas appear as those with a darker color, almost black. These trifles draw back, once again, the land of the Olmecs, and not the only time. Because the problem of separating, in the past, the Totonacs and the Olmecs will often arise. Even today, for folkloric research painter women, miscegenation seems to be the dominant trend. Jimenez Moreno had already underlined this, when the Tuxtla Gutierrez Conference. Two physical types seem to be represented. One with a flat nose and very thick lips, and the other with a thin nose and thinner lips. Today, the Negroid type, black, is the characteristic of the Olmecs, the one represented in Stela 3 of Leventa. It could correspond to a white. Again, are these the black people and the white people of the Popol Vuh? Would a Chacarero spirit look at their symbolism in that old Olmec pottery made with two clay, black and white? Because the easiest formula has already been advanced. In the field of Mayanati, the Olmec catalyst would produce the Totonac by miscegenation. This does not explain everything. Only in terms of nose. The Popoloca is flat, the Totonaca long-nosed. In the classic horizon, this miscegenation gave the physical type of La Mixtequia, almost a Jarocho. But the physical type of the Totonac has remained intact in the times of Soaked Inferior. Was it a cross with Maya or with Huaxteca? It doesn't seem like it either. That link to the south is not clear, a colony.
10:14 p.m. 75%. They are well dressed, and their clothes and blankets very polished and curious. With beautiful work, because in their land they make the blankets that they call sensen til motley, sensen quatli, which means blankets of 1,000 colors. From there they bring the blankets that have the heads of monsters painted on them, and those painted with swirls of water, ingested with each other. The men do not bring maxtles with which to cover their shame, mishwaks, although among them there are a large number. 10:14 p.m. 75%. From Tepetlan, in Ada cattle, 603, they reached Mazatepec. They had covered the corridor of the Cazones River, on the dividing line of Totonacas and Huaxtecas. When in the year 13 a cattle, 611, they settled in Sakosk, they had fully penetrated the Huaxtec homeland. But they surely learned what the Sierra de Otentepec meant, and they had to go around it through the Tamayawa passageway, to arrive, in the year 11 Akati, 619. In Iztac Huaxatlan, Wihutla, to tumble through the mountains, to fall to the loving Vegas from Mestidlan and, from Tulanzinka, undertake the company of founding Tula as a capital and as a brand. This would be the feat that Sahagin's informants would vaguely evoke, and this catalyst would cause Huaxtec expansion westward if they did not go for companions. José Corona Núñez has pointed out, with all propriety, the similarity of the temple to Quetzalcoatl, in Ictlan, Nayarit, and the Huaxtec temples. The clay figure with a conical cap and Quetzalcoatl headdress, found in Tecoluta, Jalisco. At this time, from the year 600 to 900, that architectural pattern detached from Dussolier's paragraph could also have been fixed. This idea, so common in Huaxteca, of the eternal curve, could have its explanation in that, according to the chronicles, Quetzalcoatl, originally from Huaxteca, had the circular building as his own temple, a feature that was perpetuated, with all its variants, in that culture in which 90% of its constructions are circular in plan, and in which the majority of his sculptures present another element common to Quetzalcoatl, that is, the conical cap. If so, it should be considered a line that, passing through Calixtlahuacan, will fragment into the Yucatas. Around the year 900 of the era, a group came invited by the Toltecs, the Nanoalcas. They were metallurgical technicians, and to their period of influence ceramics of undoubted diagnosis are associated, highlighting for the Huaxteca, in the Panuco V horizon, a very characteristic one, called black on red, black on mahogany, with such wide diffusion that Medellin Zenal found her on the island of Sacrificios. An Ekholm in Guasave, Sinaloa, and it would not be inconceivable surprise to find her relatives in Veraguas? Panama. Unfortunately, the historical accounts are lacking. For the saved a great religious change is seen, Tezcatlipoca by Quetzalcoatl, and the introduction of other cultural elements that, curiously, arrive via the Huaxteca. The circumstance of considering Huaxtecs very fond of wine, to the point of singing, the Huaxteco Totec, my noble lord, despite being a Beo do, puts Zype Totec as Huaxteco, perhaps from Zapotitlan, Castillo de Tio, in his invocation of god of drunkenness and metallurgy, to fit the historical fragment that still remembers. Like, comment.
It says appears in many Mesoamerican cults and fertility deities. Zape Toltec vividly conveys a concept of death and rebirth by wearing the flayed skin of a sacrificed victim. The lotion on his skin, ass nigga type shit.
The biblical writers recognized that the people, among them with red skin, were of an ancestral line of extreme antiquity. Some of these people were rulers in Edom. These are listed in Genesis 36. Esau the elder and Esau the younger were among them. Esau is specifically described as being red in Genesis chapter 26.
Some of the codices. Bernardo Shagon. He also contributed to the description of the Aztec language. He translated the Psalms, Gospel, and also into the Walt. Okay.
Nahuas received the title of Nair. This central Mexican tribe was one of the last tribes to surrender to Spanish colonialization. Ancient Mexican legends tell us that a foreign king named Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent, first entered western Mexico through Mexcaltitan and a nearby mainland nation known as Aztlan. The ancient Mexican legends call Quetzalcoatl and Ixipla, Ixipatala. In Nahuatl, the name, God becoming man, in the sense that Christians believe God came to earth in the body of Christ, is Ixipla, which literally means skin of a god. In Sanskrit, the same word is used to describe God Shiva in human form, Ishiputara. Putara means son of. To remind the Aztecs of Quetzalcoatl's conquest of Mexico, seashells adorned the sides of the temples dedicated to this deity. Seashells are also associated with India's god Vishnu. The language, as well as the name, of the pre-conquest people of Mexcaltitan, which extended into southwestern United States and to Central America as far as Panama, excepting the Mayans, Zapotecs, and others, was Nahua or Nagawa. In Sanskrit, a similar compound word, Nagavak, means language or speech of the Nagas. I believe that the Naga leader Shah Nahu aka Nahu Shah bequeathed his name to these peoples. Some ancient Indians stayed behind in Mexico as governor earners, the Nayars. The word Mexcaltitan, pronounced Meshkaltithan, may have a Sanskrit origin, nation in place of god Shiva, Meshi. When my wife and I were visiting Mexcaltitan in 1982, a 104-year-old villager told me why his ancestors left the island and trekked to Tenochtitlan, or what is now Mexico City. He said that his ancestors believed that the island of Mexcaltitan was the promised land that they had been seeking for centuries. There they stayed and built homes made of seashells. One day, Garuda landed in what is now the city square. The pilot told them to abandon the island and follow his eagle-shaped craft inland. All the inhabitants except into the Americas, or simply represent intra-population variation 2, 3, 7, 10, 26 to 28. These inconsistencies are probably owing to the difficulties in assigning a single individual when comparing to population mean data, without or simply represent intra-population variation 2, 3, 7, 10, 26 to 28. These inconsistencies are probably owing to the difficulties in assigning a single individual when comparing to population mean data, without explicitly taking into account within population variation. Reanalysis of W. W. Howell's worldwide modern human craniometric data set squared to the power of 9, supplementary information 9, shows that biological population affinities of individual specimens cannot be resolved with any statistical certainty. Although our individual-based craniometric analyses confirm that Kennewick man tends to be more similar to Polynesian and Ainu peoples than to Native Americans, Kennewick man's pattern of craniometric affinity falls well within the range of affinity patterns evaluated for individual Native Americans, supplementary information 9. For example, the Arikara from North Dakota, the Native American tribe representing the geographically closest population in Howell's data.
If you notice, any time that it comes back Negroid, that they find a Negro skull, well, DNA tested. And, you know, nobody knows what that is, and it's always going to come back what we say it is. Nobody knows. It is whatever we say it is.
Set to Kennewick exhibit with high frequency closest affinities with Polynesians, supplementary information 9. Yet, the Arikara have typical Native American mitochondrial DNA haplogroups cubed O, as does Kennewick man. We conclude that the currently available number of independent phonetic markers is too small, and within population craniometric variation too large, to permit reliable reconstruction of the biological population affinities of Kennewick man. Archaeologists dubbed the skeleton Kennewick man, after the place he was found, and hoped his bones could help settle one of the greatest mysteries in the story of human migration. How did Homo sapiens, originating in Africa, end up in the Americas? The dominant theory was that humans trekked here on foot around 13,000 years ago, during the Ice Age, when seas were lower and a land bridge temporarily connected Siberia and Alaska. But other evidence suggests humans were already living on this continent well before that particular pathway was possible. And Aztec powers were from the north southward, through 3 several lines, as is sometimes held, one on each side of the Rocky Mountains, with a third following the coast. In this way such advocates trace the course of the Olmecs, who encountered the giants, and later of the Toltecs. That the Botanic peoples or some other ancient tribes were then a distinct source of civilization, and that Palenque may even be Xibalba, or the Nakan, which Votan founded, is a belief that some archaeologists find the evidence of in certain radical differences in the Maya tongues and in the Maya ruins. Squared. In the Quiche traditions, as preserved in the Popul Vuh, and in the annals of the Choctaquels, we likewise go back into mistiness and into the inevitable myths which give the modern comparative mythologists so much comfort and enlightenment. But Bancroft cubed and the rest get from all this nebulousness, as was gotten from the Maya traditions, that there was a great power at Xibalba, if in Central America anywhere that place may have been, which was overcome 5 when from Toulon went out migrating chiefs, who founded the Quiche Choctaw peoples of Guatemala, while others, the Yaqui, very likely only traders, went to Mexico and still others went to Yucatan, thus accounting for the subsequent great centers of aboriginal power if we accept this view. As respects the traditions of the more northern races, there is the same choice of belief and alternative demonstration. The Olmecs, the earliest Nahua comers, are sometimes spoken of as sailing from Florida and landing on the coast at what is now Panuco, whence they traveled to Guatemala, and finally settled in Tamanchan, and offered their sacrifices farther north at Teotihuacan. This is very likely the Votan legend suited to the more northern region, and if so, it serves to show, unless we discard the whole theory, how the Votanic people had scattered. The other principal source of our suppositions, for we can hardly call it knowledge of these times, is the Codex Chimalpopoca, of which there is elsewhere an account. And lastly of Perseus, who, according to the explanation of the book, held the head of a monster which he had slain in combat. Blood was dropping from it, and for hair it had snakes. Wilford, ACATIC researches. As the stars forming a constellation have very little connection with the figure they are supposed to represent, when we find the same set of stars called by the same name by two different nations, as was the case, for instance, with some of the nations copied from the other, or that both have copied from a common source. Astronomical Myths, Flam Marion Blake, E. American Indian Names of Constellations, it is proof that one. Ezekiel's Wheel, the zodiacal ring, exhibited the 4 seasons: spring, the ox; Taurus, summer; the lion, Leo, autumn; the eagle, replacing Scorpio in the standard of Dan; and winter, the man, Aquarius. And their appearance. Holding a look from St. Matthew, chap. v. verses 1 to 12. Larijung Galuna Mutu Libugate Luagu Wubu. Tidong Ligia Buga Urarut. Lane Disaplu Hayabure.
She tripping. I ain't even gonna do y'all like that. She got us fucked up. Oh my God.
The Carif language is spoken by a black and woolly-haired race, whose small settlements are scattered along the shores of the Bay of Honduras, the Mosquito Snore, and even along the northern coast South America, as far as the mouths of the Orinoco. This people differ in personal appearance and intellectual constitution from all the neighboring tribes. They are athletic and well-proportioned, active and energetic, adroit and intelligent, cheerful and highly excitable. They are descended fr the brave and warlike aborigines of the Caribbean islands, and are hence known to Europeans by name of Carifs or Caribs. They retain all their ancient customs and manners, among which is practice of polygamy, but they never appear to have possessed any definite system of religion. Ron Catholicism has been partially adopted in some of their settlements, but none of the Caribs are on its dominion. All legislative power is vested in the hands of certain elders, called captains, elected the people. The Carib women perform the labors of agriculture, the men occupying themselves.
Fishing, hunting, and smoking. Who are we? Fishing, hunting, and smoking. Chataway, chief of the Black Cherubians of St. Vincent, and his 5 wives. Captain George and his family. And you see what the problem was. The same thing that was mad at the Wale or the Gullah Geechee for. Y'all got too many wives up here. Where they tell the chief of their tribe, nah, man, you gonna be a Christian, man. You about to tuck that in. The Garifuna chiefs who led a revolt against the British colonialism government in St. Vincent 1795 killed that year, and now considered the national hero St. Vincent. And the Grenadines also believes in Costa Rica. Vincentian politician Camilo Gonzalez described him in 2011 as his country's sole and national hero. It says, introduction: by the second half of the 18th century, the Carib population of West Indies has been either disseminated or driven off out of most of their home possessions by the forces of European penetration of St. Vincent. However, was still a major center of Carib population in 1763, when the island along with Tobago, Dominica, and Grenada and the Grandies were ceded to Great Britain at the place of Paris, which brought 7 years war and close to its Carib population was approximately 3,000 souls. St. Vincent, like Dominica and Tobago, had been pawns in an Anglo-French struggle for Caribbean supremacy of the early decades in the 18th century, and not until 1748 both powers and treaties Aix-la-Chapelle agreed and regarded them as a natural outside limit to either penetration and agreement, which was violated by France, suspecting St. Vincent and Dominica. I'm saying y'all can read the rest if y'all want. But y'all see they was chopped away black Caribs for prime sugar cane growing in land and skilled hell. Did you see what's growing the sugar cane for them in the West Indies? The results of the slave uprising in Haiti leading to the eventual independence and slave revolt also occurred on Guadeloupe, and the French began to stir up sentiments of revolution among the, I guess it says the Indian mulattoes and Caribs, and those islands recently occupied by British, French Jacobians, so Jacobites. Governors of Guadeloupe, black Jacobites, let's be correct. Governor of Guadeloupe, Victor Hughes, played a role in advocating revolution in St. Vincent and promised to support the French Republic if the Caribs and the French settlers took action against the British oppressors. And the ideas and equally running from that Catholic Church were taken to heart by many of the French leaders. And the revolution in the time of Sinox saw a simple law and exploit tensions to help defeat the British by a certain division of the Eastern Caribbeans. The French forces in the Caribbeans were known as Brigands by the British and consistently largely of free slaves and French privateers who were as much motivated by a desire for privilege and profits as by the ideals of the French Revolution. Part of the wider conflicts involved the taking of the American ships trading with the British and French privateers. And one of that pirate trade with them Huguenot Jews. Hughes' plans were to coordinate rebellion with Grenada and St. Vincent, but had to be changed in the military state of British or St. Vincent's was weak in the position. The point in was an ideal time for the Caribs and the French allies to strike, who spread from Grenada and other plans to the Governor Seaton's requested meeting two chiefs of the Carib, Chataway and Duvalle. The response was it was too late to negotiate. The Second Carib War began in March 8, 1795, and the burning of La Croix estate. The Jacobites rebellion, Swarthy, servant, Swarthy. As you can see who was coming. Black, curl hair, strong, ruddy, black, ruddy. All right, y'all, tap in with the next one.